Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Maready. I'm the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions for the Erie Canal Museum in downtown Syracuse, New York. The museum is currently closed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and in keeping with the state's guidelines for non-essential businesses. We are hoping to reopen to the public sometime in the hopefully not too distant future, but until then we've been doing all kinds of digital and online programming for you, including this video. This is one in a series of my Curator talks that we've recorded and put out on YouTube via our Facebook page and our website and our other social media. Our full-timers are doing a lot of programming just like this, so if you like what we've been up to, please support the museum at this time. I'll put a link in the comments so that you can become a member of the museum or make a tax-deductible donation to our annual fund. You can help ensure the future of the museum by contributing to us today. So since you clicked on the video, I can only assume that you're interested in learning more about the Erie Canal's appearances in popular culture. Everyone knows the song Low Bridge, Everybody Down, but did you know that some of the original lyrics are different from the ones most commonly sung now? Or that the Erie Canal appears as part of the story in the hit 1962 epic Western film How the West Was Won? So in this video, I'm going to tell you about the Erie Canal in music, film, radio, literature, and other art forms. The Erie Canal was one of the first major public works projects in America, and it was the marvel of the age, and as such it had a huge impact on the popular culture of the last 2 centuries. The Erie Canal in popular culture was romance, adventure, and the kind of rough and tumble and occasionally violent lifestyle that was on its way out by the early 20th century and the end of the Erie Canal's heyday. Canalers were both heroes and anti-heroes, and not necessarily bound by the societal and cultural norms kept by non-canalers. All of the various ways in which the Erie Canal appears, both in popular culture and established history, contribute to this collective memory of and folklore surrounding the Erie Canal. You should know that there are going to be some spoilers ahead for some of the media I'll be discussing, and I cannot claim that this is a comprehensive overview of the popular culture surrounding and involving the Erie Canal. So if I don't mention your favorite song, film, or story about the canal, I do apologize. But it is my intention to give you a nice overview of what's out there. If I miss something that is important to you, please, by all means, put it in the comments. Let's get started. So you don't get a talk by a staff person from the Erie Canal Museum without your prescribed dose of Erie Canal history. The canal's importance to New York and national history cannot be overstated. This importance led to its indelible presence in popular culture. There are 3 iterations of New York's Erie Canal. The construction of the first original canal, which is now known affectionately as Clinton's Ditch, began July 4, 1817 at Rome, New York. This canal spanned the 363 miles across the state from the Hudson River to Lake Erie and was 4 feet deep and 40 feet across. The original canal had 83 locks. The enlargement projects on the canal began in the 1830s and lasted until the 1860s, with continued improvements beyond that. The enlarged Erie Canal was increased to 70 feet across and 7 feet deep, and 11 locks were removed in the straightening process, which took the total down to 72. The original and enlarged canals were movers of people and ideas, as well as financial resources such as raw materials and finished goods. A lot of people, especially new immigrants that came over from Europe, they traveled on the canal to the interior of the country and brought religious movements, ideas, and their culture along with them. The canal was the information superhighway of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Women's suffrage, abolition, and utopianism were all ideas that traveled and spread as a result of the Erie Canal. So the enlarged Erie Canal was closed in the early 20th century, and the New York State Barge Canal System was constructed beginning in 1905, opening May 10, 1918. This canal system spans 524 miles and includes 4 branches: the main Erie, along with the Cayuga-Seneca, the Champlain, and Oswego canals. It makes use of natural waterways across much of the state, including the Mohawk and Oswego rivers, which have been canalized with added locks. In western New York, there aren't suitable natural waterways to support a canal system, so the canal sections out there are man-made, at a minimum of 120 feet across and 12 feet deep. The current system has 57 locks and sees a lot more recreational traffic than business traffic. It's not the great mover of people and ideas the way the original and enlarged canals were, but it is still a major draw for people who live in New York as well as those around the country and around the world. So now that you've got some historical grounding on the canal, let's talk about the popular culture that it generated. So we all know that song about the Erie Canal. I got an old mule and her name is Sal. So the original title of this song is Low Bridge, Everybody Down, or 15 Years on the Erie Canal. These days, a lot of people sing that line as 15 miles on the Erie Canal, or even sometimes 16 miles. Music evolves, lyrics change, miles rolls off the tongue better than years. I get it, but I will keep fighting for the singing of 15 years. The common myth that this is attributed to is that mules covered 15 shifts in a canal boat, in 15 miles in a canal boat pulling shift. The shift was measured in hours rather than miles. Mule teams and drivers, who were often young boys, worked for 6 hours on and 6 hours off, and this distance varied depending on the traffic and the terrain. In the canal's middle division, where the canal's passage was pretty level, a 6-hour shift could cover more than 15 miles. So check out this geographical profile of the canal span and see the elevation changes over 570 feet worth between Albany and Buffalo. These changes are especially striking in western New York, where the canal goes over the Niagara Escarpment to Lake Erie. A mule team and driver traveling this section of the canal would most likely not cover 15 miles in a 6-hour shift, especially at a high traffic time and going through the Flight of 5 locks at Lockport. It's a great song. It's very complimentary of Sal. She's a good old worker and a good old pal. And those of you who have heard me speak at the museum or elsewhere before about mules probably know the affection that I have for them. This is a great tribute to an animal that a lot of people regard as slow, stubborn, and stupid. At the time of the song's creation, the enlarged Erie Canal was being closed while the barge canal was being constructed. The barge canal doesn't use animal power to move boats, but steam power. So in the song, poor old Sal and her driver would soon be out of a job after spending 15 years together on the canal. The title also pays homage to the old canal, as it had bridges built low due to material costs, and if you happen to be riding on the upper deck as a passenger on, say, a fancy packet boat, you might have to duck to avoid hitting the bridge as your boat passed under it. It's interesting that the sheet music cover art shows the mule and driver ducking, as you can see here. There's some perspective issues with this image, I think. So the song Low Bridge was written by Thomas S. Allen of Natick, Massachusetts, and it's been recorded by many artists, beginning with Billy Murray in 1912 and Edward Meeker in 1913. Bruce Springsteen even recorded it in 2006. You can look it up here on YouTube. In some places, the song is cited as having been copyrighted in 1905, but Allen said he didn't write it until he first saw the canal in Rochester, and that was in 1911 when he moved there. The copyright of the song manuscript dates to November 1912, and the publisher was F.B. Haviland Publishing Company. Allen was an eclectic songwriter and performer who worked off and on as a violinist, musical director, and composer of music for vaudeville, as well as marches and waltz and commercial usage. Allen held the copyright for other songs, but none have had the lasting impact of Low Bridge. There have been a few versions of the song over the years with varying numbers of verses, but the original composition consisted of 5. There was some controversy over whether he actually did write it, or merely appropriated some lyrics and melody and made them his own, but the evidence does seem to stack in his favor. As written in the song slip for Edward Meeker's 1913 recording, Mr. Allen writes us about Low Bridge as follows. When a boy in school, a picture of the Erie Canal and a geography attracted my attention, and I exclaimed, "If I ever see the Erie Canal, I'll think I've seen something worth seeing." It was not until a few years ago at Rochester that I ever did see the canal, and I heard the expression Low Bridge. It sounded good for a comic song, so I wrote it up. Mr. F.B. Haviland also thought it good, so we inflicted it on the public. So on kind of a funny personal note about Low Bridge, I'm a cruciverbalist, and I do the New York Times crossword puzzle every day. Sal appears often as an answer because it's a handy 3-letter word and an instantly recognizable part of New York history. The Erie Canal has been the source of a lot of music besides Low Bridge, although that one is the song that sticks out for most people. I've talked to a lot of museum visitors who learned it in elementary school, and a lot of these people didn't even grow up in New York. The song shows the significance and the reach of the canal's history and of this song. There are a few different ways that Erie Canal songs were conceived. Some were composed to be part of Broadway shows and were never actually sung on the canal. These include Look Out, Dat Low Bridge from 1881 and Down by the Erie Canal from 1915. This music cover features the latter. Sometimes popular songs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries were turned into canal songs by changing the lyrics. An example of these was a song called Never Take the Horseshoe from the Door, which was turned into Never Take the Hind Shoe from a Mule. This is another song about the nature of mules and how one would be well served not to harass one. Songs like this one were actually sung on the canal. The cultural pervasiveness and perceived romance of the canal era also found its way into other forms of popular entertainment, including movies. Motion pictures were derived from photography, and photography as an art form originated in the mid-19th century along with the boom years of the Erie Canal. As the century progressed, inventors began to devise ways to view multiple images in quick succession. Early motion pictures were silent and often had music added over them. Over time, movies went from simple moving images of a few seconds or minutes to complex stories of history, comedy, drama, and romance. The age of talkies began in the late 1920s, and it is here that we take up the story of the Erie Canal as it appears in popular movies. So I want to tell you about a few examples of this spanning the period between 1929, the beginning of talkies, to the year 1962. The Girl on the Barge, from 1929. This is an early example of the Erie Canal's appearance in a major motion picture. This was a mostly silent film, and it was released during the transition from silence to talkies, and I call it a mostly silent film because it is. It does have a few talking sequences, though. Film is not only set on the canal, it was actually filmed in Whitehall, which is a town on the Champlain Canal and home to Champlain Canal Lock Number 12. It's a romance wherein the daughter of a barge captain falls in love with a tugboat worker. The barge captain is controlling and abusive, even keeping his daughter from learning how to read so he can control her life. He tries to keep the couple apart until the tugboat worker saves his barge, which had been accidentally set adrift. Ultimately, the couple is able to marry. A more famous Erie Canal-based movie is called Farmer Takes a Wife. There are two versions of this story on film, and the original dates to 1935 and stars Henry Fonda and Janet Gaynor. The story came from a play called Low Bridge, a play of the old Erie Canal, which was adapted from the Walter Edmonds novel Rome Hall. We'll be talking more about Mr. Edmonds a little bit later. This film is a comedy, and it's about a man who goes to work on the Erie Canal, but who would really prefer to be a farmer instead. He meets a woman who works as a cook on a canal boat, and they fall in love despite his devotion to farming and hers to life on the canal. This is another example of pop culture embracing the supposed romantic days of the Erie Canal. The movie was remade as a musical in 1953, starring Dale Robertson and Betty Grable, and the story was also adapted for the radio program Best Plays. We'll be talking about another famous Erie Canal radio program in a little while. So Henry Fonda had quite a career in movies with ties to the Erie Canal. He also starred in the 1940 film Chad Hannah, which came from yet another Walter Edmonds novel of the same name. The story was initially published in installments in Saturday Evening Post under the title Red Wheels Rolling. It's about the adventures of title character Chad Hannah, played by Henry Fonda, who leaves a job working along the canal in Canastota in the mid-19th century to join a traveling circus due to his romance with a bareback rider who performs in it. He gets tangled up with a slave hunter after drawing his ire for helping a slave he was tracking to escape. This is also a nod to New York's history with the abolition movement. Chad Hannah sets up with the slave hunter's daughter, who also joins the circus. He manages to get the circus into and then out of trouble, and everyone lives happily ever after by the end of the movie. In researching for this presentation, I was surprised to learn that the Erie Canal features in the beginning of the 1962 epic Western film How the West Was Won. This movie is set between 1839 and 1889 and follows several generations of the Prescott family as they move from western New York to the Pacific Ocean. The first generation to travel is seeking to reach the Ohio River country, which was the west of the late 1930s. They travel on the Erie Canal, of course. This movie tells a great story of American expansion westward, covering canal and river travel, covered wagons, the Civil War, western railroads, and the frontiers along the way. Oddly enough, Henry Fonda is in this movie too, but not in the Erie Canal segment of it. The movie is widely regarded as an American classic, and it is notable because it is one of only two movies with traditional storylines, rather than travelogue films, made in the Cinerama process, which involved the use of 3 projectors simultaneously showing on a curved screen with 146 degrees of arc. So let's turn from the silver screen to an entertainment medium that predated movies, radio. Radio was the first broadcast medium, and the period from the early 1920s through the 1950s is known as the Golden Age of radio, and encompasses the initial production of commercial radio broadcasting up until the time that television took over as the preferred medium of scripted programming. During the Golden Age of radio, families gathered around their radios to listen to dramas, comedies, musicals, and variety shows. One such program aired in 1936, and its story centered on a young boy's travels on the Erie Canal. Peter Absolute on the Erie Canal takes place in the 19th century and tells the story of a young orphan boy. Peter escapes from a boarding school where he was treated cruelly by the headmaster and joins a theater company traveling on the canal. The story is a very Dickensian feel, sort of a humorous perspective on the everyman in poor circumstances and lacking in social justice. So back in 2017, I was contacted by a gentleman named Craig Wickman, who was then serving as the executor of the late character actor Arthur Anderson's estate. Anderson appeared in radio, television shows, commercials, and film. For our purposes today, Arthur Anderson is most notable as having been the voice of Peter Absolute, the title character of the radio serial. He played Peter when he was a young teenager. Arthur Anderson later took the original scripts from 1936 and created a new, more streamlined version of the story and recorded it and released it in 1998. The museum has become home to some of the Peter Absolute items from Anderson's estate, including copies of the original script. So now we'll turn our attention to the Erie Canal and written fiction. There are a few works and writers I want to discuss who wrote historical fiction set on the Erie Canal. An early example of fiction about the canal is Marco Polo's Travels on the Erie Canal, which was written by Jacob Abbott and first published in 1843. Jacob Abbott was a prolific writer and contributed to the creation of over 200 books, many of them for young people. This work was part of a series called Marco Polo's Adventures in the Pursuit of Knowledge and consisted of young adult adventure stories that were also intended to be instructive. The title character of Marco Polo was a young teenager who took a trip on the canal with his cousin and tutor as a learning experience. In 1852, the Erie Canal volume was republished with more information and some engraved illustrations, and I have a few of these to show you. So this is cool. This shows a canal bridge, low bridge. You had to make your own fun on board a canal boat, and sometimes people like to jump from a bridge on board the boat. You jump off the boat, run up ahead, cross the bridge, and jump back on the boat as it was passing underneath. Here's an engraved image of a canal lock. And here's an image showing sleeping quarters on board a canal boat. That actually looks pretty roomy, come to think of it. So Walter Edmonds was sort of the quintessential Erie Canal storyteller. He was born in 1903 in Boonville, which was on the Black River Canal, a feeder to the Erie. Edmonds' writing, which consisted of novels and short stories, inspired a wave of upstate New York regionalism in the words of folklorist Lionel Wilde. Edmonds' first novel, 1929's Rome Hall, inspired both a play and two films, the two versions of Farmer Takes a Wife. This work stemmed from Edmonds' childhood and the familiar setting of New York's canals and his contact with canalers who lived and worked on them. Edmonds later reflected about his work. I'd been stirring Rome Hall round and round in my mind for nearly 3 years, and when I finally took off the lid to see what I'd cooked up, the book practically blew up in my face. I needed no notes, I had no outline, the book seemed to write itself. It was a wonderful experience. The first chapter was written in just hours, and the finished product delivered to the publisher months ahead of schedule, thinking that doesn't happen very often. To review the story for you, Dan Harrow is an orphaned farm boy from upstate New York who finds financial success working on a canal boat, but who longs to return to his first love of farming. The notion of orphans on the Erie Canal crops up a lot, and the reason for this is that the canal brought unique opportunities for prosperity to the towns it passed through, and seemingly didn't discriminate. Anybody could be a canaler. Of course, in practice, a lot of canal fortune seekers ended up broke, or worse, but in pop culture, the canal life may have been rough and tumble, but it could be a means of success for everyone, even poor orphans. Other canal-related works by Edmonds included Chad Hanna, which also inspired the movie by the same name, which we discussed a little earlier, Erie Water, and a collection of short stories called Mostly Canalers. So you can't talk about Erie Canal literature without discussing Samuel Hopkins Adams. He was a prolific journalist and fiction writer, and his journalism work was characterized by muckraking, especially on the subject of public health issues facing the United States, such as fraudulent patent medicines. Adams' work helped lead to the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. The best known of his writing about the Erie Canal is a novel called Canal Town from 1944. Canal Town's story involves a medical mystery, but its framing is a discussion of the daily life in Palmyra, which is shown here, in the year 1820, where the canal was under construction but not yet open. The main character of the novel is a doctor fresh out of school who seeks to make a place for himself in town and in turn help out the local residents, including canal construction workers who are becoming ill from unsanitary conditions in the work camps. Adams was inspired by Walter Edmonds' writing, and Edmonds allowed him to use his writings as background for the novel. This novel is another example of this idea of the canal as a means of change and fresh starts for people living on or alongside it. The Erie Canal made many appearances in one of the most popular magazines of the Enlarged Canal period, Harper's Weekly. This political magazine was published in New York City from 1857 to 1916 and included national and world news, essays, fictional stories, and humor pieces, along with illustrations. I want to show you a few iconic illustrations of the canal and life on the canal that were featured in Harper's. Harper's employed some of the best-known illustrators of the day. So here's a drawing of canal boats and boating families staying in Coenties Slip, which was in the East River in New York City. This image would have been viewed by thousands of Harper's readers, most of whom likely had no concept of what life on board a boat could be like. Paul Frenzini, a renowned Harper's illustrator, created this drawing of a Sunday on the canal. He traveled coast to coast, creating images of American life that were featured in the magazine. Harper's Weekly gets a great deal of credit for bringing images and stories of the Erie Canal to people in other parts of the country, contributing to this collective memory of the canal as a significant facet of American history. So it wasn't just the notable names who sang about, wrote about, illustrated, and otherwise passed the Erie Canal into the culture of the United States. Anyone could appreciate the canal and share one's interest and excitement in it. I'm going to leave you today with a poem entitled Passing the Lock, which was featured in the September 13, 1837 edition of the Buffalo Patriot and Commercial Advertiser. The poem was signed merely Hampton, and it nicely summarizes the artistic and literary inspiration wrought by the Erie Canal. The Grand Canal, how proud its glorious tide we're riding now, The bright waves dance along the shore or gaily kiss our fairy prow. The trumpet's warning notes ring out, with high tones flourish loud and brave, and then comes back the tender shout, already up the glancing wave. Now bear thee bold and bear thee well, thou pilot at the guiding helm. If fail thy hand, oh, who can tell what dangers dire our bark may whelm? Hold up, the slackened traces drop, and down the narrowing way we run, till curbed and checked, at last we stop. Hurrah, hurrah, right bravely done. We're in the lock, we're in the lock, with many a restless thump and bang, with gurgling splash and watery shock and chattering china's mingled clang. The gates are closed, and down we sink into the twilight depths below, where gushing streams from every chink like rich and sparkling fountains flow. And now, a moment now of dim repose, a moment's space of calm we win. Then wide the sweeping doors unclose, and let the welcome daylight in. The bowsman stands upon the deck in his high place of power and pride, his tin horn dangling on his neck, and shouts, "Go on!" and forth we glide. Then lightly o'er the waters fair, we take our glad and devious way. For freight we've codfish, salt and tar, and paving stones and potter's clay. What soul so full as needs be told, that two high themes my harp is strung, which ne'er inspired the bards of old, when Dante and when Milton sung. Old Homer made what we may call, in liberal phrase, quite decent rhymes, but there was no grand canal to wake the muse in those dark times. I do love that one. Well, thanks for listening to me talk about pop culture in the Erie Canal. Again, if you want to support the museum at this time, I'll put a link in the comments, and please, by all means, in the comments, share your favorite piece of Erie Canal popular culture. Be well, be safe, and take care of your family at this time. Thanks.